This is LT Melton with FetchYourNews.com, and I'm here with Pickens High School head football coach Chris Parker. Coach, you guys have been putting in your summer work. You're starting a new season. Obviously, you guys had a really successful season last year. Talk a little bit about the summer work you guys have been putting in and what you guys have had going on.
Well, what we do in the summer, and we had spring football. Now you can choose to have it or not have it, but we had spring football in May, and then we give the guys a week off. Right after that, which is usually when there's finals and graduation and all that. And then we start in the summer, and in June and July, we'll go from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the mornings, and we have our young guys in for 2 hours and our older guys in for 3 hours. And, they work out, and then we can do a little bit of football stuff with no helmet or with no shoulder pads or anything on, just some kind of teaching time, and we were able to do that. And then we try to go once in June and once in July to a camp, and nowadays those camps you can put shoulder pads on, not leg pads, but you can put shoulder pads on, and you can do a little bit of relatively live things and kind of see what you got. And nowadays those things have become an important part of getting prepared for the first part of the season. I don't know if that part matters when you get into October, November for those games, but I think in those early season games, the quality of work that was put in June and July, and maybe you can learn some things that can help you in those first 2 or 3 games. And now, we start practice the 1st of August, and you're scrimmaging, usually a week or two after that. So you don't have a whole lot of time like you did a long time ago to put everything in and all that. So it's really one continuous season starting around, the middle of May when we start spring football. We're pretty much doing something, with a break here and there and with the weekends off and all that, all the way through. So, right now we're in July, and we're preparing to go to a team camp at West Georgia, which we'll go to actually tomorrow. And it's a great camp for a lot of reasons, but one of them is we'll get to compete a little bit, and you get to kind of put some different guys in scenarios, and nobody loses. So we're going to leave that camp 0-0.
Right.
But you do get to learn some lessons that unfortunately sometimes you don't learn until it does count. And so I think everybody's summer kind of fits in there somewhere. People do, 7-on-7 stuff too, which we've done as part of that. But that's pretty much a standard summer for probably not just us, but I would assume most everybody or teams that are like us.
Now let me ask, you mentioned the padded practices. Talk about the things you gain from those practices as opposed to the 7-on-7 drills.
Well, it includes the linemen. That's probably the biggest difference. But the 7-on-7 stuff's great too. We've done that for years, and we do some of that now, but we probably don't do as much as we used to. I feel like we're trying to win football games on Friday night. That's the ultimate goal.
Right.
We're not trying to win 7-on-7s. It's fine if it happens, but that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is be able to pass and catch and do all that when there's people running at you, and when you have to pass block. And sometimes that's the most difficult part of the passing game. It's not that hard to catch and throw. It's hard to pass protect. And so we try to throw the ball at some of these padded things and try to make it realistic. We want to be able to throw the ball. It's going to be an important part of our team this year. But they're both important, I guess, is the way to do it. You can teach a lot more in the 7-on-7s to just the receivers or the corners or whatever, because there's a lot more. You're guaranteed to get the ball out of your hand and give somebody a chance. You're not going to get sacked. With the padded thing, it may be a little more realistic to Friday night, but you may not be getting as many reps with your wideouts and your corners and stuff. Maybe a little way better for the offensive and defensive line. So probably a good mix of both of those things is really the right way to do it nowadays. GHSA passed that rule maybe just 2 or 3 years ago, where you could wear shoulder pads at some of these camps. And so pretty much everybody's doing it. Some people may be doing it more than I would, but we try to do it once in June, once in July. Try to do too much of it, but enough where it's not a disadvantage if we don't do it. I feel like if you didn't do it at all, it would be a disadvantage to your team in the first few ball games.
Now, you mentioned working on the passing game. You guys ran the football very efficiently and ran the ball quite well last year. Obviously, you also had one of the best running backs in the state. But this year, you're bringing back maybe one of the best quarterbacks in the state, one of the best dual threats. Could be a guy that might win, that might be the play of the year, and Zach Bird. Are you guys going to air the ball out more? Or is that just going to be just how you feel?
It kind of depends. I mean, I think that we we would like to have the option to be able to throw the ball and be effective at it. We like to be able to run the ball. I think any coach would tell you, if all things were equal, it is easier to run the ball. If we were going to gain 5 yards either way, it's easier to be able to run it because less threat of throwing the ball and catching it, and it's easier to drop a ball or overthrow it, or it's always good to be able to run the ball. And that's why the teams that win usually can run the ball at all levels of football. Some people run it a little different than they used to a long time ago. It's a little, maybe different formations or different. But if you watch Oregon and you watch some of these teams that seem really cute and you really watch, they pretty much
run the ball. Right.
So running the ball is very important. Going to have to run it differently without Shannon. Shannon was a very good football player, and that would be a challenge for us to replace that. We're not going to act like it's not going to be, but I think the answer to that question is all those positions. Our H and our Z and our X and our Y. I mean, all those different positions, the receivers and the run, they all have to do a little more probably. So quarterback has to do a little more too. Is be able to run the ball and throw it. And the answer to your question is when you had a player like Shannon, you would not allow the team to not let you give him the ball. You had to find ways to give him the ball. That was part of our job, to find ways, no matter what they were doing, to find ways to give him the ball. I think without a player like that, but with a lot of good players back, because most everybody else on offense is back, we would like it to be a little more of, we'll just kind of do whatever they're letting us do. If this guy catches 8 balls one game and 1 the next, then so be it. And if this one runs the ball a lot more this game and this one does the next game, so be it. And in a weird way, that is actually easier on us as far as picking where we feel like the better matchups are, versus saying, no, we're going to have to give this guy the ball.
Right.
It doesn't matter where they line up, we're going to have to give them the ball.
Right.
So it will not be easier to play without Shannon, but it would be easier in some capacity of saying, if a team is going to give this to us by they're playing this many people and it's the run, so this area, then we just throw it out there, and that player has to make a play and has to do things. And if they do, we'll probably win, and if they don't, we probably won't. It probably is that simple for us that we have to kind of take what people give you, kind of cliche, but we do have to do a better job of just probably taking what the team will give us. And so if that means our quarterback running it 20 times, then it does. And if it means him running it 1 or 2 and throwing it 20 times, then that's fine. Well, I would say the guys who are seniors for our team this year are guys who came up as 8th graders going to 9th grade when we got here. And so being here 4 years, it's good to see kind of guys come all the way through the program. And we've seen them, most of these seniors, we've seen them in ups and downs, and some of them are still going through ups and downs. But it is a different feeling in terms of the total team, knowing that we have coached these guys in 9th grade ball and JV and varsity all the way through. And so, in that way, it's a really exciting season coming up for them. So I'm excited. I feel like it's a year where we could have a really good team, and it's a year where if we don't do the things we're supposed to do, we probably could struggle. So, I mean, the challenge, that kind of what makes it fun, the challenge of seeing if we can hold all that together and do the things we need to do to be successful, because it's not easy to be good. Half the teams lose every Friday. Half of them lose every single Friday. Doesn't matter how many good teams there are, half of them still lose. And it's easier to not do the right things, and it's easier to not be good at little things, and it's easier to not have a good team. So we're challenging our guys to really push themselves to be good, because the teams that we play, I feel like all of them in their own way probably have gotten better, and we've lost a really good football player, so we've got to get better too. And so I'm excited to get a chance to see those guys, and Northwest will be better, and Coach Tank, my buddy's up at Ridgeland, he's going to do a good job there. They beat us last year, and he's a good guy. He'll do a good job there. And Gilmer got a new coach, got some excitement. So I mean, I know all those teams it'll be tough, so we better come ready to play, or it's going to be a challenge for us. So I'm excited to see. That's what's exciting to me, that if we knew we'd win every game, it wouldn't even be that fun, or it's exciting that we get that challenge of being in a region where I feel like a lot of people are a lot like us. So we got a chance, but we're going to play well.
Now, Coach, you guys have your Ironman testing going on. Tell us a little bit about that and what you've been seeing from the guys as far as your testing is concerned, and some of the work they've been putting in.
Yeah, I've been proud of the guys. I think we probably have as strong and as fast of a team as we've had probably as a whole. Last year, a couple guys were very good times and lifts, and maybe we may or may not have guys at that very number one level. We may. But the number of guys who can do certain weight is kind of how you evaluate your football team. We talked before about, in football you really want to have the most number of good quality players on the team. It is about having one really good player, but not as much as in maybe basketball. in some of the sports where you can rally around one guy. It has to be the number of quality players. And, because we got a lot of returning starters and because we got a lot of kids on the team, we probably have more kids that can, power clean 225 or more and can squat, 335 or more. Just kind of those range where you want to have X amount of kids that can do this. Every team can line up maybe their one guy who can squat 600 pounds, but you play the whole team. So from that standpoint, we're very pleased with the direction of the program and the number of kids that are able to do quality lifts and are decent speed. Coach Wharton does our weight room, does a good job. Coach Nelson also, and they do. It's a big part of the program. You got 4 parts to the football program: offense, defense, special teams, and strength conditioning. And we always talk to our guys about, the reality is the strength conditioning is probably the most important of those 4 things, and the offense probably gets a little more of the credit or blame, but a lot of times the defense and the strength conditioning determine how the seasons go. And so, been really pleased with that, but it'll be exciting to see some of these guys and do their testing and, genuinely see some guys when it's test times, kind of like game day, some guys rise up and some struggle, and so it's always interesting to see who does more than we expect them to or more than their previous max lift or whatever it was. So look forward to that, but overall very pleased with our strength program and the direction it's headed.
Now let me ask, obviously the strength condition is a important part of every football team and every team in any sport, but when you guys run the no huddle and don't really have guys that play both ways, do you find that it's even more important, the strength and conditioning and more importantly the conditioning aspect?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to get some of that into practice. I mean, that kind of blurs the lines of all the different phases because we have workouts and then we have practice. Well, I think the teams that play fast a lot of times try to turn their practices into workouts in some ways.
Right.
The conditioning, we do a lot of our running as part of the football. We don't just line guys up and run them over and back like we did back when I played, back in the day. More of our running is, from one play to the next and from one drill to the next, like a lot of people do now. That part is very important. From the lifting standpoint, you line up against teams and you want to be as good as you can be at each position. And, we see so many different types of offenses and I guess in some ways different types of defenses, but what comes to mind is seeing the different types of offenses and the different types of players you got to have on the field to take on those, those guys that are under center running the ball every play and guys that are in the guns throwing it every play and then everything in between. And so it's important that the guys are physically gifted enough to be able to do a lot of different techniques. And so the stronger and the faster and the more explosive they can be, the more likely we can come up with things that they can do. That will help us win the game. So it's very important that they get stronger. I feel like in the weight room for any, it doesn't matter what your team does, maybe the aspect of how they practice or how quickly they move from one lift to the next and things like that may actually factor into how we play on offense, I guess. And that defensively now you see so many teams that play like that our defense has to condition themselves to be ready to play fast, even though they don't determine whether we do or don't. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And let me ask, the specific drills in the Ironman testing, were they the drills that they've always done, or were some things that you incorporated specific to your team's needs? Or like obviously you have your 40-yard dash, you have your bench press, but are there some of the things in the Ironman testing that you wanted implemented specifically for training for your offense and for defenses to face different types of offenses?
For the testing,
yeah, for the testing.
Don't. In the weight room, in the weight program, we do. There's exercises. Our young men do a lot of snatch and a lot of deadlift, which are specific lifts that we like for what we're trying to get out of them. But we don't max those lifts,
right?
Because bad technique can cause some injuries. Plus, it's not really that big a deal to us how much they can do. It's more, can they do it over and over again, like a football game?
Right.
There's no football game where it's just one play and then you're done. So. But it is important with bench, squat, and clean. We do measure bench, squat, and clean and the lifts, and then 40s and pro agility, 5-10-5, and vertical jump. Just those 6 things. And I can't take credit for that. Coach Maxwell at Dawson County now, coach. I know they got a Fetchy News in Dawson.
Yeah.
Coach Maxwell over there. Coach Maxwell was my boss for a long time when he was at Sequoia. and they did it this way. And we try not to do a lot of things that we've just always done, but with the testing, it's one of those things we just keep it the same because it's easy to compare, kind of year to year for us to see what maybe some years are. If our team is maybe struggling a little bit in one aspect of that, we can reevaluate how we trained them, over the year. And so with the testing, we actually try not to think about our specific team or our specific kids. We try to just say, we're going to do these 6 things.
Right.
And then they can get points. And we try to make it a game for them kind of. But the numbers are more for us just to see where we stand. And then, but what we do on a daily basis in the weight room and in the speed work, we constantly try to change it. We may change stuff say we're going to do something in January all the way through, and in April we may change it because we just feel like it fits these kids better. Same you got to do on offense and defense, whatever. But I do think when there has to be some consistency, kind of like in football, you measure. If we're doing offense, we're going to look at how many first downs we got, what do we average on first down, what percent of passes are incomplete or what percent are dropped, stuff like that. That's universal. It doesn't matter what plays you call. And then you got to call some plays that fit these kids. And so I think same thing with the testing is for the players, and we want them to have fun, and that's why we make it a kind of a competition. But the reality is we like to keep some consistency to see, especially maybe for lateral speed and straight ahead speed. Like if our 5-10-5 shuttle times are bad, then we probably haven't done a real good job with our lateral speed training.
Right.
Done a better job with our straight ahead, and then vice versa. So, so we probably would keep stuff the same. And we just, we've done that for a long time. But we definitely tweak the workouts based on what we want to get done, whether it's on the field or what our players are able to do. Now,
obviously, you've seen good things out of your team in the off season. You've been impressed with how the testing is going so far. How do you feel about, basically, what's your confidence level and your team's confidence level with having such a veteran team this year as opposed to last year when a lot of those guys were young guys that were thrust into starting roles? Now they're the old heads and they've had starting roles already.
Yeah, it's different. It's always better when you got the Division I running back to hand it to every play like we had last year, and that made up for maybe some guys feeling their way through it. The difference is this year they're not going to have that, I hate to use the word like it's a bad thing, but they're not going to have a crutch to say, okay, we just give Shannon the ball, maybe he'll just run them all over and get a touchdown. We're going to have to do everything right. And so, but we also have probably a better team equipped to do those things from a standpoint of the number of quality players we can put out there. So, it's going to be interesting because it's 2 different teams where one is kind of, you got some young guys playing, but you got this one really good player, or you can have Team B where you got more consistency, but everybody's going to have to kind of pull their own weight. I think if you ask coaches that, you'd get probably different answers on which teams got a better chance to win there. So I'm excited about it, but I think there's more room for us to not do a great job with it without having that guy we know. If we jump off sides and make it 1st and 15, it's not a guarantee that we're going to get 15 yards. Where when you got that really explosive player, you don't worry too much about that. You just run the plays and figure they can make up for a mistake. Now, jumping off sides will be a big play, offense or defense. Something like jumping off sides, something like holding, not catching a punt we could have caught. Things that just change the field position a little. I think will have a bigger impact without really star players. So it becomes important that all those guys do their job, and I think they will. I feel good about these guys, but I think that's the challenge. That's what's different. It's definitely nice having a bunch of guys that have played, but you can't hide from the fact that the one that played the most isn't out there, so they all have to step up. And I think Shannon scored 35 touchdowns or something. Most teams don't score 35 touchdowns, so that's like 3.5 a game. So you're looking at 24, 25 points a game by him.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of catching up to do. So I'm excited about this team. I'm really excited about them. They've done a really good job. But I want them to know, that all of them have to do a little bit more, and they've got to do their 1/11th of the job, which we always talk about. But it probably becomes even more important when it's genuinely 11 guys that probably are all relatively equally valuable to what we're trying to get accomplished out there at one time. And so it's going to be exciting to see what they can do. The region's going to be tough, and probably most teams in our region kind of jumbled together. So I'm excited to see these guys how they measure up.
Now, I'm glad that you mentioned the region. We talked a little bit about the region before, but expound on the teams in the region. You're at this point, like you're one of the not older coaches, but one of the coaches that's you started as the new guy. Now you're one of the more tenured coaches in the region. Obviously, you've had success in the region. You're familiar with the region. Talk a little bit about the competitiveness and some of the different teams. Obviously, you're looking at your Cartersville. You have Wesley Tankersley now at Ridgeland. You have a new coach at Gilmer. Just talk a little bit about the region and your thoughts on it.
Well, it's a good region, and it's a competitive region for us. We like the region because, one, we feel like it's, maybe with a couple exceptions, but it's mostly teams like us, small, one school in the county, or, at least generally similar athletes as we have. So I feel like we have a chance to compete most games, but I also like that the teams are pretty well coached and they do a good job because we also have a chance to lose most weeks, and that's where you want to be and where you as a coach can help put your team in a chance to win. If you're in a region with teams you have no chance against, and that's frustrating. And in some ways, I think it's frustrating for teams that are in regions where they don't feel like they get pushed very hard. We know every week we've got to compete with these guys, and I'm always, something that a lot of probably the parents and fans and the players don't know is just how good of guys we got in our region. I'm always really impressed with when we have our meetings and stuff with the quality of good coaches and just good guys in our region. We try to kill each other out there on Friday nights, but most of these guys are real good men and good guys that are enjoyable to compete against, and that actually makes it fun for us to be in, for a region. Personally, I like being in a region with these guys. I think some good men at all these schools, and I consider a lot of them good friends. We just try to beat them to death, I guess, when we play them. But other than that, Coach Tangersley did a good job at Gilmer. He did some work on us a couple times, so we know him well, and I imagine him going to Ridgeland will make them. They've already been a good team. I'm sure he'll make them still a good team and probably maybe even a little better. And Cartersville's always got a really good team. They're probably a little bit better than most teams we play, athletically, but they also do a good job coaching. Coach King and all those guys, they do a good job. So they'll be tough to beat. Ridge will be tough to beat. Gilmer's got a new coach, so I don't really know as much about, what they will do, but he seems like a good guy. I'm sure he'll do a good job. And they've got a lot of guys back off of their team, probably a lot like us. They had a couple of key guys that were seniors, but if I remember right, they had a lot of guys back. So I expect they'll be a good football team. And Northwest is always, I feel like, one of the better coach teams. Coach Robinson's a friend of mine. He does an excellent job, and they have beat us up a couple times too, so we know them well. And and then Southeast was much better last year, made the playoffs. Coach Gray, they made the playoffs for the first time in 20-something years or something. I mean, unbelievable the strides they've made. So I assume they'll still be good. And I thought Heritage did a great job. They got a new coach, seemed like a nice guy. They really probably did as good a job as anybody until we got to Cartersville, slowing us down on offense. And in Lafayette, Coach Fisher, they did as good a job on offense some ways. They moved the ball up and down the field on us. So, I mean, pretty much everywhere you go in the region, there's something you can say where, well, we're going to have to deal with that this week, or we're going to deal with that. So, I mean, you could sit here in July and say we could beat every one of these teams, but you could sit back and say these teams could beat us too if we're not going to do what we're supposed to do. And so, I guess that makes it fun. You want to be in a situation where the reason you play is to compete.
Right.
And so we're going to get our chance to compete. But I think that the region is a good region. It's a good group of guys. It's a hard, most every game is a hard-fought, competitive game, and we expect to be right there at the end. We expect to be in the mix with these teams. And last year we played Cartersville for the region championship. That would be great if we got that opportunity again, and that's what we want to get to. But it's not going to just happen. We're going to have to win all these games, which, like I said, now, Coach Tangersley going to Ridgeland, just makes them that much tougher. And
right.
Gilmer probably getting a new excitement to just make them that much tougher. And Northwest, had some injuries last year that this year, they'll get some young guys that'll be older, and they're going to be that much tougher. So I fully expect it to be a tough year, and we're going to have to earn everything we get. A couple years ago in this region, we lost 4 games. All of them were the teams that won 9 games. We lost twice to Northwest, once to Gilmer, and once to Cedartown. All had 9 or more wins that year. So, I could see a similar situation where some teams have some good years, and
right.
depending on how the injuries and how the ball bounces and things like that, separate some of those teams from the others. But every team in our region is a team like us that we can compete with, but also a team that if we don't do things the way we're supposed to do, then we'll have a hard time.
All right, Coach, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but not put you on the spot. Eliminating everyone on your team, not a dragon. Who is the best offensive player in the region and the best defensive player in the region? Not on your team. Like, who is the guy that you know coming into this season, when we play them, he's the guy on offense and defense?
Well, I'm going to say this, and, I'll probably have to hear about it. I'm not trying to set the boy up for failure, but the quarterback that played at Cartersville, my exact words to the guys in our office, which I now say publicly, is there is no way that Peyton Manning looked better than this when he was in the 9th grade. So I can only imagine that he's going to be a whatever star, wherever he wants to go, 5-star, wherever, to whatever school he'll go play. I don't know him personally,
right?
But he is the most talented quarterback I have ever seen. So it would be hard to pick anyone other than him to be an offensive player. It's probably not even a fair question in that regard if you know all those people.
Fair enough.
After that, I know, really there's a lot of guys in our region that are decent players that can make some things happen. And the good thing about high school football is the turnover is so different. Like, unless they're, like this boy from Cartersville and like Shannon, where they kind of play from a real young age.
Right.
Most of the guys make big strides from 10th, 11th grade or 11th to 12th. So right now, some of the best receivers we would see and some of the best back, we don't really know about them. Think of like Gilmer's running back from last year, who's back.
Russell Cox. Yeah, you're right.
And after this quarterback who's so in his own league, after that, this would be one of the probably better returning players, I would assume. Last year was somebody that was just this time of year just a guy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so that happens a lot on offense, defense too, but I remember he comes to mind, the running back that they have at Gilmer, some of the linemen they have at Gilmer, some of the better offensive players in the region. I think they got a receiver that's pretty good, and Northwest got a couple of receivers and guys that are pretty good, and Ridgeland's got guys that I think played both ways, so I don't know if they categorize, but they had a couple of big guys that are really, really talented guys, like fullbacks, running back guys. Those people come to mind, and then pretty much everybody that Cartersville puts out there is a decent player. Defensively, Cartersville's got a linebacker that's, I thought, one of the best players we saw all year last year as a junior, so I assume he'll be that way again. I can't remember his name. He plays inside linebacker for him, number 34. And
it's understandable. Everybody knows coaches know numbers from film.
Yeah. But there, several people on the defense of Cartersville were good players that are back. They had a couple of DBs that were good players. But that inside linebacker stood out. I thought looked like a legitimate player. And then, there's some guys on several of the teams that I probably know more about the defensive personnel because I watch when I watch as my position coach,
right.
I watch the other team's defense. And so, every team we played I thought had a quality guy here and there that was a legitimate contender, for being a all-region defensive type player.
Right.
Southeast has a couple of good players on that. Southeast has a couple of good offensive players too. And so, it's hard to pick on those with D linemen and DBs, and it's totally different positions, but probably gave too much away with my assessment of the quarterback at Cartersville. But the reality is that he's a good player. I mean, There's a reason why everybody in the world has offered him a scholarship. I mean, and he's in 10th grade.
Right.
So you can pretty much take this tape and just rewind it and ask me that same question for the next 3 years.
Right.
I give that same answer.
Okay, fair enough.
But he's a good player, and I think there's a lot of good players in our region, but a lot of good coaches that put them in those positions and work with them all year. And football just become that kind of a game where you got to work on the stuff all year. The margin for error between the really good teams and the really bad ones not that far off. And so, like we talk about, half the teams have to lose.
Right.
So when 8 teams in our region, 4 play 4 of them going to lose every Friday. And it doesn't mean that 4 of them are good and 4 are bad. It means 4 teams had to lose.
Right.
And so you have to separate yourself to be one of those 4 that won. And so it's a challenge. And it's a challenge with some of these quality players that we see. And hopefully if somebody on another team's talking, they'll say, we got a couple of good players. Maybe we do. but you took them off. So.
Yeah, well, I had to take them off because
And I wouldn't
clearly
have
you got to pick your
complimented them.
guys.
I wouldn't have
Right.
complimented them now anyway. We wait till the banquet to say something.
Gotcha.
But I'm happy to be around these guys in the region. I do feel like an older man now in the region, but I think this is a competitive region for us. I'm hoping we can keep a comparable region when they change regions after this year, because I enjoy working with these guys, and I think it's a fair game most every Friday night, competing against these guys up here.
Well, Coach, I appreciate your time and good luck throughout the season.
Thanks, LT. Appreciate it.